It was T.S. Eliot who said, only those who risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go. I'm going to start off by asking you 3 questions. First up is, what does risk-taking mean to you? Next, I'm going to ask, are you a risk taker? Would you consider yourself a risk taker? So if we were talking on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being, yeah, I might go on a walk somewhere different, 10 being, yeah, I'm an extreme base jumper. Like, where would you sort of see yourself lie on that scale? And then finally, what do you want to do that pushes you outside of your comfort zone? My name's Sarah Davis, and in a nutshell, I describe myself as a professional risk manager with a passion for risk taking. So my work has seen me spend over 2 decades in risk management, mostly in financial services, and that's been in market risk and operational risk. Outside of work, it's all been about sport and challenging myself and going on adventures. And that in the recent years has seen me go on like 3 pretty big expeditions. So one was the Nile, going down the Nile in Africa. And this was all self-organized. Then there was doing the solo descent of the Murray River here in Australia. And then more recently this year cycled 4,700 Ks-ish across Australia. So effectively, that is risk-taking. But fundamentally for me, I see it as being about exploring what's possible and exploring what I'm capable of, what my passions are, and also allowing me to be led by my curiosity, even when that does take me outside of my comfort zone. And I think this idea, what is possible, like for each of us is obviously going to be completely unique. Like we all have our own strengths and capabilities and things that we love. And when we start to explore them and really explore what's possible, we're going to be heading out into uncertainty and taking an element of risk, and we are pushing our boundaries and getting out of our comfort zone. And talking about getting out of comfort zone, like this photo, right? So that's me, and that's in Zambia in Africa with the Zambezi River below. At this point, I have so much adrenaline just being pumped through my body. My whole body felt like total jelly. I was absolutely terrified, right? And it did feel incredibly risky, but obviously I'm standing here today. It was a successful risk that I took. And that is what I want to talk about today, is about successful risk taking in our personal lives. Why it's important, some of the things that can hold us back, and then, the kind of process that we can use, which will help us overcome all of this, and one that involves using our risk management tools, like some of the stuff that we use at work. But before I continue, I would really love it if, looking at that last question, if you could actually think of something that you've thought about doing or would like to do that would take you out of your comfort zone, that would involve kind of an element of risk. And maybe it's one that you've been held back from doing for whatever reason. So it could be anything from, traveling to a new destination, looking to do a new experience, bungee jumping, a new sport, a hobby, moving cities, changing careers, starting a business, trying online dating. I don't know, just have a thing. And if you need to, pause this, because I think it would be quite valuable as we go through the presentation to see what kind of resonates for you. All right, well, hopefully you've got something in mind. Alrighty, so this, I'm sure a lot of you will recognize him. This is Alex Honnold, and he is a professional risk climber. He's a professional rock climber. And he has most definitely pushed the boundaries of what's possible in the climbing world. So in 2017, he became the first person to solo free climb El Capitan in Yosemite National Park in the US, which is where this photo was taken. And, you've got nearly 1,000 meter near vertical kind of times vertical slab of rock rising up out of that valley below. And he has got, as you can see on this picture, there's no ropes, there's no harness, there's nothing but him keeping him on that rock and not falling to the ground below. and on the outside of it, it looks like extreme risk taking. But as Alex says, he says, look, I pushed my comfort zone and made it bigger and bigger until these objectives that seem like totally crazy fell within the realm of the possible. And if you've seen the film about this, Free Solo, about the climb, you'll know how he did build up to it, and how he did, keep increasing his comfort zone, and how he planned this meticulously, like it was choreographed. And this is what happens, when we push our comfort zones, our world does become a bigger place. And then there's just so many more things we can do. And I am not suggesting by any stretch of the imagination that we should all be taking out rock climbing, but we do need a level of risk taking in our lives and pushing our boundaries and exploring our possible. If we look at where we're living at the moment and compare it to 18 months to 2 years ago, the concept of large numbers, even the entire workforce, is working from home would have seemed impossible, and for senior management, like way too high risk. But now suddenly it's become the normal. Now, if we wind it back a little bit further to, thinking about what we were like as kids. So as kids, we are constantly exploring what's possible, and we are pushing our boundaries. Like if we didn't, we'd be adults with training wheels on our bikes, right? But as kids, we trusted the process. We trusted that we would master that skill, and we accepted that we may have some wobbles and some falls getting there, and we may have been nervous and fearful, but we didn't let it hold us back. Yet as adults, we let fear and other things hold us back. And it's just like, wouldn't it be awesome if we still had that same attitude, to effectively risk-taking in our adult lives as we did as kids, and not overthinking things. Biologically, we are programmed to take risk. Like without it, humans, wouldn't have explored new lands and eaten new foods and learned to traverse the seas. I don't know, potentially our species may not have survived. And then in more recent years, we wouldn't have seen the tech change and innovation. Like, you get my drift. We have things like the neurotransmitter dopamine. So dopamine actually sort of effectively encourages us to take risk. It drives us to seek out and learn by eliciting a sense of satisfaction when we accomplish things. And I like this quote from Frederick B. Wilcox, a businessman, who says, progress always involves risks. You can't steal second base and keep your foot on first. And if we do that, if we keep our foot on first, we are then playing it safe and we limit our growth. We're not testing our capabilities, and we run the risk of, kind of letting life happen to us rather than being in the driving seat and living intentionally. And if we do that, then it's going to be hard to kind of, become all that we could possibly be. And this concept of striving to be the most we can was part of American psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure many of you would have seen this pyramid, although I understand that Maslow never actually created a pyramid to represent it, but it's a nice way of showing it. So what you have at the bottom is it's the basic needs. It's your safety needs and your physiological needs: air, food, water, security. Then we have our psychological needs. So that's around esteem, self-esteem, respect, and then that love and belonging, our friendships, our sense of connection, our family. And then at the top, you've got your self-fulfillment need, and that's, around achieving our full potential, and one that Maslow sort of also talked about being a growth need. And as he said, look, you can choose to go back towards safety, back towards first base, or forwards towards growth. And as he encourages and says, growth must be chosen again and again, and fear must be overcome again and again. And it's kind of like we start as this small dot inside a wider, a large circle, and that dot, here we are with all that untapped and unexplored capability and potential, and the bigger circle being the boundary of all that we could potentially be. And as we grow, we move towards that boundary, but, we can let ourselves get stopped. And as Newton's first law, like the law of inertia, says, if a body is at rest, it will remain at rest unless acted upon by a force. You know, without taking risks, without applying that force, we stagnate. Then our growth is going to be constrained. We're going to remain that kind of smaller circle. You know, getting those feelings of fulfillment is limited. We don't have as many meaningful challenges. You know, we're not creating our future, more like being passively dragged into it. So what are the things that potentially do sort of stagnate us and stop us taking those risks? And look, obviously for everyone, it's going to be completely unique and dependent on what we're dealing with. But there are often some common threads. So one would be the uncertainty, the fact that when we're doing this, we're heading into uncertainty. We have fears that we're potentially overcoming. Like that bungee jump, that's me overcoming a massive, massive fear of heights. I wouldn't say I necessarily overcame it, but I overcame it enough to do that bungee jump. I'm still frightened of heights. We can be quite overwhelmed, like whether it's the fear or the uncertainty or the size of the project. That can create overwhelm. We can have self-doubt because we are unproven in what it is we're about to go and do. It's the unknown that we're going into. All of these things can make us feel quite vulnerable. We may not know how. Like my Nile trip, I didn't have a clue how to pull that one together when I came up with the idea. And all of this creates that feeling of discomfort. And then on top of that, there could be, we might worry about what other people might think. We might worry about failing. And I can assure you, when it came to particularly my Nile expedition, I felt all of this and more, and it was almost enough to stop me. I mean, luckily for that, I wanted that trip so much. I was so determined. It was like a visceral response. I knew I needed to do this trip, that it helped me overcome all of that. And it was a big trip. Like that involved, it was 1,100 kilometers of rafting through Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda, 3,000 Ks of kayaking through Sudan and Egypt. So those are countries that I wasn't familiar with. Some of them do get an unnecessary, I'd say, bad rap. And I'd never been on an expedition before, let alone organize one. But I got so much out of it. It was this incredible life-changing adventure. And then after doing the Nile trip, when I then decided I was going to do the Murray here in Australia, that was like a walk in the park in comparison, right? I always had to stop myself being too blasé. It's not to say there weren't things that scared me. And, I did have that moments of fear and facing fears. Particularly, there was one day sitting outside my tent and a brown snake came around the corner. And for those of you outside of Australia, naturally being an Australian snake, it is deadly. I've never moved so fast, and I don't think that snake has done either. Anyway, it all ended up well. But it's good to, just think about what are some of the things that do hold us back. So again, I'd ask, reflecting back on that idea you came up with the start, like the idea of something that you would do that would push you outside of your comfort zone. Is there anything here on this list, or things that I mentioned, or other things that would potentially hold you back? I think it's really valuable to be conscious of those things and have that self-awareness, because then when we run through this process of planning and analysis and so on, we can start to unpack, things like the fear. And when we start to unpack the things and we take away the assumptions, some of these things can start to lose their power. When we talk about risk-taking and risk, what we're comfortable doing, our personal risk appetite, it's going to be different for all of us, right? It's not like we are implementing the risk appetite as defined by our boards or senior management. It's a really personal thing, and it's going to be different for all of us. Like the risks I take may not be the kind of risks you would take, and vice versa. For example, I was chatting to a mate on the beach the other day who I bumped into, and he goes out on surf skis. So surf skis are a narrow, long kayak, sit-on kayaks for going in and out through the surf line. And he'll go out in massive, massive surf right, which I wouldn't even consider going near the ocean in, right? But then at the same time, as we were talking, he's not even sure he'd be comfortable just going on a holiday to Africa, let alone doing an expedition, and feels way more comfortable and would rather stick to Hawaii. So, it's not comparable. It's not it's not relative to, you know, we can't compare ourselves to others. But regardless of what our tolerance is, it is something we can grow by repeatedly exposing ourselves to it. And because when we do that, we build our courage. And you'd have seen either this quote or something similar, this one from Nelson Mandela, who said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." Courage, I really think it is like a muscle. It's something we can build. The more we approach our fears and we overcome them, we build that courage. And our fears, like once we face them and overcome them, they don't have that same power over us generally. We get comfortable as we do this more often of going into uncertainty. All of this builds our confidence, will increase our connections, that we're going to meet more people going and doing new things. And we build our knowledge, not necessarily just on what we've done, but also our self-knowledge about ourselves. So again, I'd like you to reflect on that idea you had at the start. And here where we're talking about, you know, some of the positives that we get out of taking risks and pushing ourselves. How do you think you might feel if you'd achieved it? Or perhaps reflect on a risk you took, you know, that really successfully took, but pushed you outside of your comfort zone. How did it make you feel? You know, were there any ripple effects across your life or unexpected results? You know, whatever it is we're doing or looking to do with some simple planning and risk analysis, you know, we can get that perspective. We understand what we're getting into and really set ourselves up for success. So what does this process involve? You know, one, as we've already talked about, it's coming up with the cunning plan, your idea rather. And okay, we've already talked about picking something. Like I said, it could be a sport, a hobby, a course, or developing a new skill, traveling somewhere new experience. You know, maybe if you are happening to feeling stuck in your life, picking something just for the hell of it. You know, you don't necessarily have to have something with a reason behind it. Like, I don't know, deciding to invest in doing an MBA to further your career. Maybe it's you want to have a go at rock climbing because you've always wanted to try it. And I don't know, who knows, you might discover you are the next Alex Honnold. It's about revving the engines, you know, getting out of a low gear. Or it might be to solve a problem. Like, for example, for me, so I was born in the UK, moved out to Melbourne with work, established a life there, and then they transferred me up to Sydney, and I suddenly had to like build a new life and find new friends. And I just found it a lot harder to do. And a combination of one, wanting to do some voluntary work, and two, wanting to make some friends, I just thought, right, I'm going to go and see if I can join a surf lifesaving club and, you know, find like-minded friends there, you know, active, outdoors, loving the ocean. So I signed up to do the bronze medallion to become a volunteer surf lifesaver. That in itself took me way out of my comfort zone. You know, I had not grown up on surf beaches, let alone going out in the surf, on a board, rescuing people. But I really nearly dropped out of that course. But I didn't, and I made it through. And I'll never forget, like, being given my uniform, and the first time I put on the red and yellow cap, you know, tied under the chin. I'm sure you've all seen that one, the red and yellow uniform, and stepping onto the beach as a qualified surf lifesaver. You know, I mean, I'm kind of automatically doing it now. It's like that standing prouder, and I was really proud of that achievement, and it gave me confidence. And it solved those problems, but it took me places I never expected. So yes, I met loads of people, like awesome, so many of my great friends are through the surf club. I then got involved in teaching, so I started teaching the bronze medallion. I'd never done teaching before, and I loved that. I took on leadership roles within the club. I ended up getting my first board position as a board member of North Bondi Surf Lifesaving Club. And then it got me into different sports, and in particular, it got me into kayaking. Like or surf ski paddling. I'd never done it before. And through that, I started, you know, pushing myself and going into bigger races. Then I got into ocean ski racing, which is similar, but instead of going out of the surf, you're kind of out through the ocean. Through that, I got to do races around the world. I ended up qualifying and getting to go to the World Ocean Ski Championships in Hong Kong. As an age group contender, I got gold place, gold medal in that one, you know, wearing the green and gold, like this extraordinary experience. And then from that, you know, if I'd never been a kayaker, I would never have done the Nile trip. So you don't always know where something's going to take you, or how good you're going to be at something. And another great example, and I love this. So this picture here is Priscilla Welch. And it's a great example of where a life change can take you just by trying something new. So she was born in the UK. At the age of 35, she gave up her pack-a-day habit, smoking, and was encouraged to start running by her husband. And, you know, she was an ordinary person. She was a communications clerk who, in her own words, did not have any athletic experience until she started running. And she'd never been a runner. So a year later, she ran the 1981 London Marathon in an impressive, like, she cracked the 3-hour mark, which is phenomenal for a first marathon. And then she went on to take out 6th place in the 1984 LA Olympics. And okay, obviously she obviously had a natural running ability, but she'd never explored that. And as she said, if you want to become the best runner you can be, start now. Don't spend the rest of your life wondering if you can do it. And look, you can take out runner and apply whatever's, you know, relevant to, applicable to you. But I think what's really key, and what I love about what she says here, it's about becoming the best you can be. It's not about becoming the best. Another quick example of, you know, not knowing where something could take you, Craig Newmark started his email lists of upcoming events. And it was just around letting, you know, his mates know and cultivating a bit of community of things that were coming up. And it sort of grew, and people asked to either be added to it or had their events added to it. And that grew and grew to the point that he launched Craig's List in 96, which, you know, that went on to make him a multimillionaire. So I think it's just finding ways to bring incremental risk into our lives. It's not about putting it all on the line, you know, and instead of quitting a job and starting your own business, consider launching it as a side hustle, you know, and then you can take it on as a full-time job. And I just think it's just important to be having that level of risk, and, you know, making sure we avoid the risk of regret or inaction and wondering what if, you know, as Priscilla says, as life goes on. So once you've got your idea of whatever it is you're going to do, you know, naturally then we've got to go through, we've got the goal is to start to plan it. And like with my Nile trip, having never organised or been on an expedition, it was almost a plan to make the plan. Like, it was involved lots of Googling and reading books, reaching out to experts in the field to then help me make that plan and understand what was involved. I mean, that took, yes, I was working mostly full-time and then went part-time, and it took me 2 years to organise it. But I think, you know, you can, there's always people to ask and to find out, like whether it is Googling or talking to people who've done what you want to do. And I think it's important to make a plan and really break it down into really bite-sized pieces, so that it's almost like a no-brainer to, oh, this is a really easy thing to do. So, for example, if you were you were going to launch a side hustle and you wanted to build a website, well, if you had the action build the website, that's going to be really overwhelming and seem like a massive task. But obviously, if you break it down into decide on the domain name, decide on who I'm going to host it with, or investigate what the plans are, decide which tools I'm going to use, Wix or Squarespace to develop it, what templates am I going to use, what's my menu going to be, what is going to be like the key points on each of those pages, what are some of the images, and you just break those down into individual tasks, and suddenly things don't seem so overwhelming. And I think it's important also to put dates against things, to plan it, put it in your schedule, put it in your calendar of when you're going to do these things, and by constantly then ticking off things off the list, like, you know, it feels good, you get that dopamine hit, and it helps keep that motivation going and creates that kind of snowball effect. So yeah, I just break it down and find people who can help you, get the advice, and create a plan that's going to get you there. Then we get into what we all know and love, and that's the risk management side of things. So that is taking our goal and our plan and performing some risk analysis to kind of unpack it, unpack some of the assumptions we might be making, reducing some of the uncertainty and putting mitigants in place where we need to, as well as potentially plans to deal with problems that could arise. The tools that we use will be dependent on what it is we're doing, what's going to add value, and kind of like what we're familiar and comfortable with using. I know Alex, the organizer of this conference, I understand he used monte-carlo simulation for his wedding budget, for example. So it's up to you. It's like whatever's going to help. Anyone watching this who's less familiar with risk management tools and practices, I'm sure at some point you would have done a pros and cons list to make a decision. And that kind of is a simple risk management approach. So I'm going to run through now what I've done on my expeditions, and I just used a simple approach of building a risk register. This, and the way I approached it was, it was literally trying to, blank piece of paper, and I did a lot of mind mapping and trying to work out how do I approach this and break it down. So I started off with the categories of risk. So as you can see here, we've got one of them medical and physical. So it's all the injuries and illnesses that could happen. Then it was a case, and also that was the medical and physical. Then there was environmental. So that is the weather, extreme heat, extreme cold, storms, all of those sorts of things. Also the river conditions, which really varied from like grade 6 massive rapids through to pretty much still water as we approached things like the dams. And then you've got the animal risks, of which there were plenty. So we had things like hippos, which I did get to face one of those, as one of them, she charged and attacked us and literally bit into the back of the raft. Not a highlight of the trip, and definitely put hippos up there as one of my least favorite animals. On top of that, you've got crocodiles, snakes, spiders, all that kind of good stuff. Then you've got people risks. So that would be everything from not getting approvals being taken away, unlawful arrest, through to more violent kind of situations like being attacked or kidnapped. And then finally, the equipment risk, like what was the key pieces of equipment, what could go wrong with those. As you can see from this, I've done an inherent risk rating. It was a fairly simple 5x5 matrix. I didn't do residual risk. It wasn't going to add value to me at that point. And this is why I say, you do it to the point that it's adding value and then you stop. Because it just came back to my risk appetite. Am I comfortable with then the mitigants that I put in place and the actions to manage? There were well over 100 risks that I identified for this. I did also end up building a controls library, but that was a bit of overkill. Running through an example in a little bit more detail. And I've picked this one because unlawful arrest was something that happened, and I am going to talk about that story in a bit. It's a good one. So we've got there the likelihood, the impact. I get my overall rating. Impact, I really just looked at it as a physical impact of potential injury and delays to the expedition. Again, financial wasn't really going to add value. Strategic. This is what, again, it's making it relevant to you. So the mitigants on this, I wanted to make sure I had approvals in place for whatever I was doing. Different countries required different approvals and permits, and carrying proof of those. Having local people with me, so all the way through I had locals with me who would potentially be able to avoid situations or hopefully de-escalate, talk down. I did hostile environment awareness training before I left Australia, so that was around getting a bespoke briefing on all the countries I was going through, all the potential risks, political situations, and so on. And then it was everything from, how to stay safe in hotels, through to the stages of a kidnap and when you're best, trying to get out of a kidnap, how to, not be doing the same thing each day so that you're sort of predictable patterns, all sorts of things. It was really interesting. Kind of scary training to go through, but really valuable. One of the things by doing this risk analysis, it made me appreciate things that I couldn't come up with the mitigants for, and I needed to outsource. So this, I this last point here, assistance company. So I engaged a company that gave me an operator to check in with each day, Dave. So I would send him a message each day with agreed protocols to sort of identify who I was. And then he would send me a really detailed intel report. He was there to deal with any crisis such as this that would come up. And they also had a cyber team that was looking at my my social media and then keeping an eye on things like online chat rooms and the dark web for any kind of like slightly dodgy people talking about me. And we did have some people with a bit of form for kidnapping talking about me, but I'm happy to say I didn't get kidnapped. And then, the actions to manage. So here it was like, contacting the embassies or governments, but really the first point of call was going to be contacting Dave for his advice to help deal with any situations that came up. So obviously, this was a really big piece of work, but I found it so valuable. For me, it created boundaries of what I was getting into. It took away a lot of the uncertainty. It unpacked some of the fears. It gave me perspective. The only tiny thing that happened that wasn't on my list, so paddling through Sudan, through the Sahara, obviously it's a very dry heat and it was really windy, so my hands were sort of dry, wet, and it got to the point that the skin on my hands and my feet literally just started cracking open. It's like not a massive thing, and it was just creating small cuts, and obviously cuts was something I did have on the list, but it would have been, there are things I could have done to have addressed that. So that was the only thing. Like other things did go wrong, but was able to manage everything that came up. So yeah, I think it just, it helps us give a perspective of what could go wrong. We're looking at worst case. But you also want to be realistic about what could go wrong. Yes, it's possible that your risk may not pay off, but when we've done this kind of analysis, we've also got to make sure we're reflecting on the upside as well. Before I talk about that anymore, again, think back to the example that you've got, the idea of something to take you out of your comfort zone. What analysis might you do? And look, if it's something, a lot smaller, as I say, this was a big project. Something smaller, say you want to go and try scuba diving and you are nervous about that, then maybe it's a case of working at what are all the things that could go wrong, and then reaching out to an expert, someone who's done scuba diving, or talking to the scuba school and having a chat with them about how things would be managed if they went wrong, to use that to alleviate any of those fears, and that you understand exactly what it is you're getting into. So once you've got your worst case, like I say, you want to focus on the upside. Like, you don't want to do this to death to the point that it puts you off. As long as this is falling within your risk appetite, that you actually end up avoiding the risk, and one that, you never know, that could change your life or take your career to the next level. It's then learning to let go of that anxiety and trusting what you've done. Focus on the upside of what this is going to bring you and where it could take you, and confident that you've done this planning and you've done the analysis and you're ready to get going. And then it is a case of, as Nike says, just do it, and just take it one step at a time, and then another, and then another, and making sure you celebrate the milestones as you go, and you're getting those dopamine hits. But then as you're going, like we've got these actions to manage what might go wrong, being prepared that things just won't go to plan. As Eisenhower said, in preparing for battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. Because life is a game of snakes and ladders, right? Things aren't always going to go to plan. And, as they say in the military, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Life's no different. Obstacles will come up. Things won't go to plan. And we've just got to be ready to adapt and to overcome. And, and when things don't go to plan, to avoid the stressing and the blaming or anything else, is to just keep focusing what is in my control to deal with this. And those are going to be, what we do, the actions we take, trying to manage our feelings, our emotions, and then managing what we say. And when I talk about what we say, it's not just what we say externally, it's also what we're saying to ourselves. We can solve the problem, and we can do it without, assigning blame and everything else. We just take control of the things that we can, and And when we hit an obstacle, like we hit one of these snakes, you know, it's not game over. We roll the dice and we've just got to find another way. So I talked about the, you know, the unlawful race before. I'll talk about one thing that didn't go, well, was definitely an obstacle on the trip. So I'll tell the story that got to this point. We were in the raft, and these guys, left to right, Koa, Paolo, and Peter. We'd come down one river, and we were then it was going left as we were on the edge of a lake. So this is in Rwanda. The lake's on the edge, on the unmarked border with Burundi. And then we have multiple channels going that we needed to go along, or one of the channels we needed to find. So we decided to ask the fishermen, because while I had my GPS, they didn't have all the channels. I didn't want to end up going the wrong way and having to back paddle. One of the fishermen said, yep, cool, come this way. As he did that, he basically led us across this unmarked border into Burundi. And he said, just wait here. I'm going to call my mates, and they're going to come and show you the way. And I was like, oh, awesome, thanks, that's really kind. No. So his mates, the next thing we know is there's this tinny, so like a tin motorboat coming across the lake, and on the front of it was a guy with a machine gun. And then behind him were two guys with their AK-47s. Awesome. So they come over, they take our papers. We did not have papers to go into Burundi because it was never a plan. They instructed us to row across the lake for questioning. And this is where we get to this point. So we got out of the raft. I really can't remember what Peter was explaining at that point. I don't know if you can see in the background, like there's lots of people there. So all the local villages, there would have been like 200 villages, I reckon. They set up a cordon to stop them like coming forward, watching this bizarre spectacle. You know, you had this random blonde white woman in this weird boat, this red inflatable boat with all this stuff inside it. And so they were watching this spectacle, and we were being questioned, obviously taking it very seriously, as you can see from this photo. But already the action plans had kicked in. So as we were going across the lake, rowing across the lake, I very subtly on the GPS sent a message to Dave to let him know what was happening, so that then he could start, and he could track where I was at any one time. So we had to unpack all our stuff. They went through everything. We were then told, no, we are going to take you further into Burundi for more questioning. So at this point, the police had taken us. We were taken for questioning. We were put into a very basic hotel, which I did have to pay for. I'm sort of put under house arrest. They took away our mobiles, my laptop, cameras, all of that stuff. But I managed to sneak in with me the GPS and the satellite phone. So then literally our first night under arrest, I managed to sneak out onto the balcony, literally crawling on the floor under the cover of darkness, because I knew I had to stay down because there was an armed policeman like guarding us across the road, and like put in a call to Dave, and who reassured me that work was underway to get us out. And a few days later we were released and continued after a couple of days with the expedition. But, you know, it was a big obstacle to overcome, and it was definitely very, very stressful. James Penny, American businessman and entrepreneur, he says, I'm grateful for all my problems. After each one was overcome, I became stronger and more able to meet those that were still to come. I grew in all my difficulties. And this is so true. Like, that's where the growth comes from. You know, it comes from the struggle, and we need to learn to embrace that struggle and those obstacles that come up. You know, it's always messy, it's never great, but you know, when we overcome all of those, we can start to make deposits in what I refer to as the cookie jar. And I love this concept. So this was a term I came across from David Goggins, who you may well have heard of. He's a retired Navy SEAL and this like mega ultra endurance athlete. And the cookie jar, it's not cookies, unfortunately. It's everything that you've overcome, right? It's all those things that you've suffered through, all the things that you've got in your way and you've overcome, and all those incredible things that you've achieved. As he says, it's a reminder of how badass we are when times get hard. And, you know, there could be things that you that are in your mind, and when times get hard, you recall them. Or you might want to, just write some of these things down and have a little box or a jar and put them in, or you do like I do, and you put them in a spreadsheet, because I do risk management. So of course it's in a spreadsheet, right? And you just keep them in mind. And because it's just like, struggle is where, as I say, where the growth comes from. And the more we struggle, the more we begin to, and again, this is sort of coming from a concept from David Goggins. He's like, you callous the mind. And so I've got, you won't be able to see it, I don't think, but I've got calluses on my hands from kayaking. These calluses allow me to paddle for longer and paddle harder without my hands hurting or bleeding. And when, it's the same when we overcome these struggles, like we callous the mind. And by doing that, we become anti-fragile, to use the term made popular by Nassim Nicholas Taleb of his book of the same name. It's then, we use shocks and stresses to strengthen us. And the more we do that, we learn not to shy away from discomfort and pain. When we callous the mind, we're able to push ourselves harder, and not quit. And we develop, as we're doing it, the more we do these things, we develop different tools that will help us. And those tools are things that we can, use again and again. And that really is the process, right? You pick something, you come up with a really good plan, or you get help to do it. And even if it's you want to have a go at scuba diving, break it down into a plan. Have a look at diving schools, have a look at dates, have a look at costs, find someone I want to go and do it with, book it, do it. Break things down into these plans, do the analysis that you need to. Take those small steps, make sure those small steps really keep you going, overcome the obstacles, and deposit in the cookie jar, and give yourself a big tick. And the thing is, obviously this isn't like something you just sort of go around once. It's a continual thing. Like we keep going around and we keep picking something and trying and exploring. And, the more we do it, the more we're going to get, as I've said before, getting comfortable stepping into the unknown and not having all the answers and learning to back ourselves, being comfortable with that vulnerability and all that uncertainty. And, through all of this, we become more courageous. And that then builds our confidence, and it builds our knowledge. And then we're in a way better place to take up opportunities that come our way. So then, if someone asks you to work on a new project, maybe you're going to be more likely to accept it. Or if someone invites you to try a new sport with them, even if it's something you wouldn't ordinarily do, maybe you're like, yeah, okay, I'll just have a crack at it, because you never know where these things might take you. As Emma said, Toyota have said in one of the recent advertising campaigns, they say you don't have to be amazing to start, but you have to start to be amazing. And that's what I really want to encourage you to do. Potentially start small, start with smaller risks, improve your tolerance for risk taking, build that confidence, then take more. Or if you've got something bigger in mind, just take a small step towards whatever it is. Again, using the scuba diving example, but, say you're afraid to do it. Well, maybe just start by just getting a mask and goggles and going in the swimming pool. But just do something, because I really think the dangers of playing it safe are kind of like, they are like silent killers. It's things that then it will just creep up on you over time. It is like the air just slowly leaking out of the tire, and then it suddenly turns into those missed opportunities and missed job opportunities, or losing a sale, or your confidence getting knocked, or not feeling truly alive. Experiment with risk taking, and to do it to a point that you find it's enhancing your life. And remembering everyone is different, and you'll know when you found the right balance, when you're feeling fulfilled and you haven't got those regrets about the risks you didn't take. This is a snapshot of some of my adventures, my more recent adventures. Obviously this is why I love to push myself, but it's not the only thing. I've got out of my comfort zone so many different ways, from whether it's doing public speaking, emigrating, moving cities. I started a business. I took on roles I really didn't think I was capable of. I've made career changes, and absolutely they haven't all worked out. But I've gotten value out of every single one of them. And you know, like the bungee jumping from the start, yeah, I would never do that ever again. But I'm stoked that I did it, and I overcame a fear to do it, you know, and I felt good about myself for doing that. So as we approach the end of this presentation, I just want to reflect back on the questions from the start. So just ask you again, like, and I just wonder whether your answer would have changed at all. Like, what does risk taking mean to you? Are you a risk taker? And think about that scale. And I've slightly changed the last one. So the last one is now, what are you going to do that pushes you outside of your comfort zone? And look, I would love, and I really genuinely mean this, if you have something in mind, let me know. These are my contact details. You know, drop me an email and let me know what you want to do. And, you know, let's maybe organize a call. I've got some free templates that I would love to share with you to help you become, you know, a greater risk taker. So yeah, you know, but my final ask in closing this talk, and this is it, is pick something, commit to it, follow the process, and just do it. Thank you.